and even Mao. Or on the other hand, they'll say, well, that was a mistake. We shouldn't have done that. You know, we made a mistake. Well, thankfully there's been, I think there has been some improvement in this area. It's true that right after 9/11 there were calls from some of the people I mentioned and some conservatives for massive strategic bombing. And just a few years ago, conservatives who didn't want to admit the fundamental folly of the Iraq War said, we need to get out and just nuke the Sunni triangle. So this horrible immorality still persists, but I don't think that people would be as open, Americans would be as open to strategic bombing in the World War II sense as they were then, or not that they were all totally aware, but I think there's been some progress, and for this we should be completely grateful. But this underlying premise that it's okay to kill foreigners, it persists. It's accepted that you could just drop bombs on people. You know, in the 90s we've heard about the sanctions from a few people. And you know, 500,000, 300,000, 1 million. But you know, you kill one child in our culture, it's pretty darn unforgivable. Or 2 children or 3 children. You shouldn't have to go into hundreds of thousands for this to be seen as a crime. And you know, they say the sanctions didn't work, but they worked all too well at all that sanctions are good for and all that their purpose really could have been, which is killing people, making life miserable. Shock and awe made me really sick to my stomach. When I saw the footage of these bombings and people cheering this on, it really disgusted me. I think that the best thing that Michael Moore has ever done is in his 9/11 movie, his Fahrenheit 9/11 movie, the footage, you know, when he wasn't talking, when he was off camera and when he just showed the footage of Baghdad before the bombing. And the conservatives, they hated this. Which, you know, it's ironic because they're all saying, you're ignoring all the good stuff happening in Iraq. We've all heard that. What about the good things happening in Iraq before shock and awe? What about the good things that happened to in Iraq to people who are dead now? And they did have civil culture. They had even a degree of liberalism in Baghdad. Most important, they had people there. They had people with families and lives, people with jobs and dreams, people with faith, their favorite music, their favorite art, their favorite foods, people who got up every day, just like we get up every day. And they're gone, just like the Germans and the Japanese and the Koreans and the Vietnamese and the Cambodians and all of the people in the lesser wars killed by the US empire. They were slaughtered, and they were individual people. Now, if it's okay to bomb people because their government's evil, well, as you know, as a radical, I would say that would mean it'd be okay to bomb everybody because, of course, I see every government's evil. But if it's okay to bomb people because their particular government's particularly evil, by this mentality, you can defend 9/11. I mean, certainly the US government was aggressive in the Middle East. Certainly the US government did more to disturb the lives of innocent people than terrorists did, I mean, just in body count terms, ever did to Americans. And yet we all know that the 9/11 attacks were evil, because despite what their government did, even despite what they might have been thinking on some level, some of them, those Americans had a right to life too, and those Americans were murdered. But it's the same thing. Rights are universal. If you're going to defend shock and awe, which of course Iraq, unlike the US, wasn't even involved, but as a non-collectivist, I see that as almost a secondary point. But if you're going to defend dropping bombs on people, and you're going to be consistent, you're going to have to defend terrorism. This brings us to an important concept, collateral damage. Now, the idea is, we don't mean to kill these people. We meant to kill this person, and often, by the way, this person's not even killed, but putting that aside, this person's bad, that's our target, these other people just happen to be there. But if you know that they're there, and you drop the bomb anyway, if the state drops the bomb anyway, it's deliberate homicide. You know what you're doing, right? So you could say that's not the target, but this, of course, isn't the way it works in self-defense. We believe in the right to self-defense, but if someone beats you up, even if someone hurts your family, even if someone kills your loved ones, you can't just kill their whole family. You can't just bomb their neighborhood. You can't force yourself on anybody except the aggressor. And indeed, the right to self-defense some libertarians, I think, have a blind spot here. The right to self-defense is like all other rights. It's constrained by property rights and the rights of other people. Being attacked is not a license to violate other people's rights, any more than being hungry or being in another emergency situation. Now, they say that there are some theorists, and I'm reluctant to talk about this because it's kind of an esoteric theory, but it has some importance and it creeps up. They'll defend a lot of this on the human shield analogy. You know, they'll say, if someone's about to shoot you and they have a hostage and you have no choice, you have a right to shoot the hostage too. Well, first of all, what they say, they say that you have a right, because otherwise we'd be overtaken by armies with tanks with babies strapped to them. I've seen this argument multiple times, otherwise I wouldn't waste your time with this, but we'd be overtaken by people with human shields, and then our ethics would... First of all, it seems strange that they say our ethical individualism is unrealistic because in the real world we'd be overtaken by tanks with babies strapped to them. That's kind of funny in itself, not in a ha-ha way, but I think that a lot of this misses the point. Personally, I think it's still immoral to shoot the human shield. But if you're in a crazy Hobbesian world where people are mammals on some level. We will violate our own principles if we're forced to survive. Many of us will. It's hard to resist it. But first of all, that doesn't mean that it's right. And second of all, you can't really apply this to the warfare state. An individual has to deal with other individuals. They're held accountable by their victims, by the victims' heirs, by public opinion. And so if you end up violating someone's rights in a horrifying lifeboat situation where it's really your life or someone else's rights, people tend to be more forgiving, they tend to be more understanding, and you know that you have to reckon with that. But the state's not like that. To the extent that the state grows and is successful as a state, it's lawless. It doesn't have accountability, and public opinion is by definition in its favor. So it's to apply individual emergency ethics to the warfare state. This is all meant to obscure mass murder. We're not talking about the odd case where someone incidentally or accidentally hurts someone innocent when they're trying to preserve their life. This happens, but not very often. This isn't what we're talking about when planes are flying, way up in the air, dropping bombs on neighborhoods. There's no relation to reality at all. And of course, if we want to avoid this Hobbesian world, where people are so desperate that they do violate their own moral principles. And I think these moral principles are important, but I do think that people, when pushed, will make compromises. Most people, maybe not everybody, but I think many people would. If we want to avoid these situations, the best way is to stay the hell out of war.